For this lesson, we are going to talk about dividing decimals, not by whole numbers, but by decimal. So this is where it gets really, really important to be looking at the steps and to be making sure that you are lining up your decimals. So for dividing decimals by decimals, it is important to know for step one, the divisor, so your divisor must be a whole number. And then know that the dividend does not have to be a whole number. So if you remember, for dividing, you set up the problem, you have your dividend divided by the divisor, and it gives you your quotient or your answer. This number right here, your dividend, does not have to be whole, but this number, the divisor, does. That is really important to understand. So how are we going to make sure that it is not a whole number? For step two, you're going to move the decimal point in the divisor, so that's the number you're dividing by, to the right until it becomes a whole number. And then however many times we have to move that one over, we have to do the same to the dividend. But again, it's okay for the dividend not to be a whole number, but we have to move the decimal as many times as we did for the divisor. Okay, and just like before, we have to put the decimal in our quotient and our answer directly above that new decimal. So it's important to point out that the new decimal is what we're looking at when we're lining it up with our answer. So before we get into dividing, let's just practice actually changing the divisor to a whole number. So what I want you to do, for example 1, 2, and 3, we're going to highlight the divisor. So the divisor is the number you're dividing by. So in example 1, the divisor is 1.6. In example 2, the divisor is 0.12 or 12 hundredths. And example 3, it's 0.04 or 4 hundredths. So this is the number that has to be a whole number. It's okay for this one not to be. So what we're going to do is we're going to move the decimal to the right to make it a whole number. So I want the decimal to be all the way at the end. So that means I need to move my decimal over one time for that guy. Well, I have to do the same in my dividend. I need to move this decimal over once. So my new number, I'm getting rid of the old decimal and I'm only looking at the new decimal. My new problem would be 89 and 72 hundredths divided by 16. So we ignore that old decimal and you're only looking at the new one. So example 2, in this one, we want to move the decimal all the way to the right. Once, twice this time we had to move it. That means I need to move it twice over here. One time, 2 times. So our number becomes 9,456. I'm still going to put the decimal at the end so I remember where it needs to go when I actually divide. Divided by 12. And the 0 in the beginning doesn't really matter anymore. And then this last one, again, looking at our divisor, we have to move the decimal once, twice to get it all the way to the right. I have to do the same thing here. Well, if I look at this problem, if I move it once, I'm good. If I try to move it twice, there's no number there. So I have to put my decimal there, and since there's no number, I'm going to fill that in with a 0. So our problem becomes 70,340 with a decimal at the end divided by 4. All right, let's now practice dividing. So the first problem, we've got 17 and 4 hundredths divided by 6 tenths. So first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight the divisor. I'm going to highlight the number that I'm dividing by. So that second number here. This has to be a whole number. So I'm going to move the decimal point once to the right. Now that's going to become a whole number. If I move it once to the right there, I have to move it once to the right in this problem. And I'm going to rewrite the problem. So my problem becomes 170, because we're not using that decimal anymore. We're using this one, 0.4, or 170 and 4 tenths divided by the whole number 6. We should already know how to divide whole numbers. That was our last lesson. Now we're using this problem to actually write down here and divide. So now since we're dividing by whole numbers, it's just like the last lesson. What I'm going to do right away is I'm going to show that the decimal in my answer should go directly above that new decimal, not where it was originally, where the new one is. And then I'm going to list out my multiples of 6. So we've got 6, 12, 18, 24, 30, 36, 42, 48, 54. And then we're going to go ahead and divide. 6 does not go into 1. And again, if you need to remember how to divide, does McDonald's sell burgers? Divide, multiply, subtract, bring down. So it doesn't go into 1. It goes into 17 once, twice. Now we multiply. 6 times 2 is 12. Next step is to subtract. 17 minus 12 is 5. Last step, bring down. Back to step 1. Divide. 6 goes into 50. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times. Multiply. 6 times 8 gives you 48. Subtract. 50 minus 48 is 2. Last step, bring down. 6 goes in. Oh, I wrote a 6 here when this should have been a 4. Sorry about that. 6 goes into 24. 6 4 times. What am I doing? 6 times 4 is 24. Subtract, and we get 0. So we've got a remainder of 0. We don't have anything we need to bring down, which tells us that our answer was 28 and 4/10. Let's look at a second example here. We're going to start with the problem. 2 76 divided by 16 hundredths. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight the divisor, highlight the number that I'm dividing by, which is 16 hundredths. I need to make that into a whole number. It does not matter if the other one is a whole number. So I'm going to move it over once, twice, which means in my dividend over here I need to move it over once, twice. My decimal goes at the end there. So I'm going to rewrite this. This is 276. I'm going to leave that decimal there. Divided by 16. And then I'm going to rewrite my problem over here to divide. So 276. My decimal's here. I'm going to go right ahead before I even start dividing and put my decimal right above in my answer. Then I'm going to write out my multiples of 16, 16, 32, 48, 64, 80, 96, 112, 128, 144. And let's go ahead and divide. 16 does not go into 2, so we have to move on to 27. 16 goes into 27 one time. We multiply. 16 times 1 is 16. Subtract. 27 minus 16 is 11. Last step is to bring down. 16 goes into 116. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's too big, so 7 times. Multiply. 16 times 7 gave us 112. Then we subtract. 116 minus 112 is 4. I have a remainder. I don't have anything to bring down. I already have a decimal, so I don't need to add it. I'm just going to add a 0 and bring down the 0. 16 goes into 40. 1, 2 times. Multiply. 16 times 2 is 32. Subtract. 40 minus 32 is 8. We still have a remainder. I need to add a 0 so I can bring something down. 16 goes into 80. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times exactly. So 16 times 5 is 80. 80 minus 80 is 0. Let's do one more, and then I'm going to have you try one on your own. So this next problem we are going to do is 475 and 1/10 divided by 900, so 0.09. So again, first thing that I want to do is to highlight the divisor, the number I'm dividing by. That has to be a whole number. It does not matter if this one's a whole number. So I'm going to take my decimal, I'm going to move it once, twice. Well, if I move it twice here, I have to move it twice here. I'm going to move it over once, twice. Since there was nothing else there, I filled it in with a 0 because there was only one number to move over. I had to move over twice, so I filled in that extra space with a 0. So when I rewrite my problem, I have 47,510 with a decimal at the end divided by 9. Let's go ahead and try that problem. I'm going to put my decimal in my dividend, and then I'm going to write it directly above it in my answer. And then I'm going to write out my multiples of 9. 9, 18, 27, 36, 45, 54, 63, 72, 81. And I know that was quick. You can pause the video if you need to write that down, or use your multiplication chart. 9 does not go into 4, but it goes into 47. 5 times. Now we multiply. 9 times 5 is 40. Then we subtract. 47 minus 40 is 7. Bring down the 5. 9 goes into, 45 times, why did I write that? 47 minus 45 is 2. 9 goes into 25, 2 times. 9 times 2 is 18. 25 minus 18 is 7. Bring down the 1. 9 goes into 71. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, not quite 8. 7 times. 9 times 7 is 63. Subtract. 71 minus 63 is 8. Bring down the 0. 9 goes into 80. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Not quite 9 times, 8 times. 9 times 8 is 72. Subtract. 80 minus 72 is 8. Okay, we've got a remainder, nothing to bring down, so I need to add a 0. 9 goes into 80, 8 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, which brings us to 72. 80 minus 72 is 8. If you'll notice, we have a pattern. 80 minus 72, 80 minus 72. And again, if we add a 0 and bring it down, we're going to get 80. It goes in 8 times. 9 times 8 is 72. 80 minus 72 is 8, and it's going to keep going. So I'm going to write this answer as 5,278 and 8/10 repeating. Now I want you to try this one on your own. 35 and 4/10 divided by 8/100.